I have milkweed in my yard. It's the short kind that's orange. It's called butterfly weed. Anyway, this year we had monarchs visit the yard, and here's an egg of one of the monarchs glued to the underside of the leaf. I don't know how many monarch butterfly eggs we had in the yard this year, but at least a dozen of them went through the larval stage up to the fourth instar, I believe it is, where they then crawled off somewhere in the yard. I never did find out where, to pupate, turn into a chrysalis. However, we did have at least 3 emerge in the yard because I saw them weakly fluttering around, which is what they do right after they emerge. They have to dry their wings so they can't fly very well. This one on my hand was one of those 3 that I saw. The milkweed was also home to a lot of large milkweed bugs, which share the monarch's black and orange warning colorations, and which are probably as bad tasting to predators as a monarch. Interestingly, the bold jumping spider shown here is also black and orange, although I think its colors may indicate that it's venomous. It was interesting to watch the spider stalk the milkweed bug from a distance, but never attack. The spider was certainly large enough to have taken down the slightly larger bug, but it never did. And eventually it wandered off as the nonchalant milkweed bug kept feeding. Another spider with black, orange, and yellow warning colors is sitting in the center of its web, eating something that it wrapped up earlier. I've seen a monarch in the web of one of these writing spiders, but I don't know if the spider ever ate it. Whatever this spider is eating is being shared, willingly or not, with a couple of freeloading and fearless phorid flies. Look closely near the head of the spider and you can see those flies. Strangely enough, eating seems to be a favorite pastime among arthropods, kind of like teenagers. Here's a hanging thief robber fly eating a beetle it captured, quite possibly while the beetle was flying. Sometimes with arthropods it seems like everything eats everything else. Here's an assassin bug eating a small fly, maybe a fungus gnat. This is a hungry female brown salt marsh mosquito eating a human being, me. You can see my red blood in the tube between my skin and her mouth, which is right below her eye. If you look closely, you can also see something else that most people would not think about. She seems to have grains of yellow pollen stuck to her in a few places on her body. Both male and female mosquitoes do drink nectar, or sap, for energy, so it makes sense they would carry pollen from flower to flower. Who would have thought that mosquitoes can be pollinators? Pollen is not always the same color or the same size. These cypress vine flowers have fairly large white spheres of pollen. I've seen a very small scarab beetle, about the size of the ant that's in this picture, eating this pollen. And hummingbirds seem to love the flowers, but I'm not sure what organisms might carry the pollen from flower to flower or plant to plant. I suppose if a hummingbird got pollen stuck to its wings, it would try to wash it off in the rain or preen it off. This black blister beetle is potentially a pollinator also, which you can see from what appears to be pollen on the underside of its abdomen. Actually, though, the real reason I included this picture is because it's one of the few pictures I've taken that shows a beetle getting ready to fly. A beetle's front pair of wings are usually modified into shell-like coverings for the back pair of wings, which are tightly folded up underneath these elytra. In order to fly, the beetle must raise those coverings and unfold the flight wings. You might think this process would allow me to take a picture or two as soon as I saw the elytra being raised, but it happens faster than I can push the shutter release on my camera. I was able to get this picture because I anticipated when it would start to fly and just held down the shutter button, which of course fires off about 6 shots every second. Many people seem to think that butterflies are great pollinators, but looking at this sulfur butterfly feeding doesn't convince me it's picking up much pollen. If you look closely at it, or maybe even at pictures of butterflies that you've taken, I don't recall, at least on my pictures, seeing a whole lot of pollen on the body of the butterfly. Although adult butterflies and moths may be pollinators, their larvae certainly aren't. In fact, they might be considered anti-pollination since they eat the plants. I guess the butterfly giveth and the butterfly taketh away. Of course, not all larvae are bad. The larvae of a certain type of very tiny wasp lays its eggs inside the oleander aphid, which you can see here, it's yellow. As the parasitism progresses, the aphid becomes immobile and changes color until it becomes very dark just before the new wasp emerges. I collected some of the parasitized aphids, put them in a jar and put a little stocking over it with a rubber band and waited, and sure enough, I got a bunch of little tiny wasps, which is going to be hard to put in my collection since they're so small. I started taking photographs in 1957 when I won a box brownie camera in a Cub Scout raffle. For the next 60 years, I have been taking pictures. Currently, I probably have over 100,000 pictures of insects on my 8 terabyte hard drive. When Suzanne Moss, one of the 2 master naturalists who started the Junior Master Naturalists, asked me for some insect pictures to put on her nature bus, I was happy to help her. In return, Suzanne came by my 93-year-old mother's house and took her to the Norfolk Botanical Gardens.